All right, guys, this is going to be a twofer. And by a twofer, I mean this is the second time we were recording for the same darn turn. And I finished this turn, and it probably, I mean, I spent 2 hours with you guys doing it, and I'll be honest, I didn't hardly chip away at the turn in that. I spent another 4 hours doing it. This was a really complicated turn. A lot of it isn't really mechanically, I mean, there's some lag and stuff that makes it annoying to do turns in this game, but a lot of it isn't even that. A lot of it is not the mechanical execution, it's the thinking through it and the prioritizing and the thinking through how this will all play out. And I want to just share with you, well, there's two things. One is I'm going to share with you the updates that I've done to build up hype for the next turn. After that, I have some kind of controversial, I don't know. I'm reading this book about World War II and about Hitler, and I can't help but notice there are a lot of similarities between like the Nazi Germany's position and my position in this game. Obviously, we are the far superior ethical creatures to the, the Nazi Reich, but I don't know. I've been reading a lot about history lately, so I'm going to talk about that at the end. But that's going to trigger some people, so I'll give a warning so y'all can all click off the video if you're easily triggered and don't feel like being triggered at the moment. But first, we'll talk about what I have happening. So I basically have executed the plan I talked with you about in the last episode. We've got a ton of stuff happening. Some of the rating pressure is less. Like, we've got a guy coming here. We've got a small little contingent of idiots coming here with a small Soul Slate communion. We got a bunch of guys coming here doing Soul Slate. We've got some guys over here doing Soul Slate with some Meteorite Guard, but they're going to get body ethereal first, and then they run in and kill everything. Sounds cool, right? Right. I mean, he's probably not going to want to teleport vampires on top of me, because Ulm has teleport for their vampires. So we'll see. But we're probably going to raid and then come out. We've got another group raiding here. I had magic phase attacks coming in over here, but I've stopped those. And the reason is because we're going to be spreading ourselves thin, attacking Pelagio. And I've also got all this set up. I've got another mage coming in with Aerofend, I believe, in case he moves this crossbow stack here. We'll be fine. And we've got the Master and Slave stack coming. I'm a little worried I'll burn out the Communion. I haven't tested it. I'm going to have 8 Communion Slaves total, including the ones that come from the items, which is not a ton. But I don't have a lot of masters either. I only have like 2 masters. So I don't think I'll burn it out, but there's a small chance I do. I don't know. We'll see. I think I'm going to have personal regen on them too. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I think this will be probably fine. We're moving a small contingent of dudes out here who are going to come over here and raid into Krieg. Or they'll be ready to. We'll put it that way. I don't know whether they actually will. It's going to depend. Krieg is mad that Ulm is raiding them too, because Krieg is not surprisingly dead yet, even though their capital does not belong to them. Apparently the Great Errata lost a fair amount of his ghosty boys trying to take a Krieg fort that had 100 PD on it. I assume it's this one, but I'm not sure. We have Army of Gold, so we'll be able to deal with it. You basically have to have protection and fire resistance to take a Krieg fort, which I don't think I like in terms of game design, but it's the truth. Yeah, that's going to be a very hard fort to take. So, what else? Well, let's talk about the main meat and potatoes, which is what we have going on over here in Pelagio. So there's a few things. I have 3 magic phase attacks going off. We have a magic phase attack going off here, 1 going off here, and 1 going off in Pelagio's capital. I'm going to show you the army movements we have coming in. This is the army coming in. You can see it's a big fucking scary army. We've got probably like 10 communion slaves. We've got life after death, skeletal legion. And I think I've got everything on conservative gem use that needs to be. Light of the Northern Star, Enter the Void. And I've also got coming with us an Earth Mage with a bunch of Earth Gems. Plenty of Earth Gems to do Army of Gold a few times. Oh, you know what I don't have that I actually need? I actually need badly is I need somebody to do turn 1 anti-magic. This actually is like a problem. I don't have any real Astral 2s except this guy. I think this guy should come with him. He's going to be very helpful to keep me from getting cheesed. And I'm going to have to figure out, I might just risk these Trapahedrons this one turn on, well, it's a really bad turn to risk it. Because I don't know how many mages are there. I think we might chill. Okay, we're going to have this guy come in. And And he's going to do turn 1 anti-magic and then divine blessing. And then advance and cast spells. And he'll help deal with anything that's really hard because he'll shambler it. But I need somebody to do turn 1 anti-magic is basically the long and the short of it. So let's do turn 1 anti-magic, and then we'll do divine blessing, and then run in. Perfect. And I do have on this other... So the idea is I've managed to finagle my research such that I barely get... Because I'm moving out a ton of mages, guys. I'm probably... If I had all my mages that were fighting... Now, a lot of them aren't at labs right now because they're busy fighting. If I had all my mages that were fighting, researching, I'd easily be at 7K. Easily. Probably more. Probably like 7.5. And so I had to finagle. I had to turn off forging and some stuff to get all these things. And I might turn some forging back on and get it a little more min-maxed, like maybe make a few more water lenses or something. Because I don't have a lot of gems left. But, okay, this guy's coming in. We got... Yeah. The nice thing about this, let's show you the guy I have magic phasing. The guy magic phasing this, because this is a land fort, and because it's a land fort, I can send this dude who has to worry a bit less about poison, because he'll finish his buff script. Because guys, Pelagius dudes are slower on land. They still have some poison-tipped spears, but because we finish our buff script and other things, we'll be fine. So anyway, Iron Skin, Summon Earth Power, Body Ethereal, Quicken Self, Astral Shield, Attack Closest. He should wreck these guys at this. He's got a Flesh Eater, a hat. He'll be great. I'm a little worried about his morale. Yeah, let's swap his hat out. Let's give you a better hat. Okay. And his job is to teleport down here. Which you wouldn't think is in range, since it's on the other side of the goddamn map. But yeah, we got one extra to spare. So that's happening. We're sending Julian. Okay, the nice thing about sending him in is he should be able to solo clear the inside of the fort if he doesn't magic phase stuff inside. Which I can't think why he would. So then we're going to get this fort for free while we move our army here onto a cap where we've ideally cleared the PD off. And the guy clearing the PD off is going to be Julian. And there's a chance he can die, since I have no idea what's even there. But I've tested this, and he'll murder basically an infinite amount of province defense. If there's water elementals, a lot of them, he'll be in trouble. But we'll be fine, I think. He's very scary. He's very, very scary. So anyway, Julian is going on top of Pelagia. You can see teleporting to New Pelagia there at the bottom. Over here, this is tricky, because I've pinged this before and he only had PD. I didn't ping it last turn. It's probably about a 200-person army, which is kind of scary. And if he's patrolling, then this thug is going to gym bait and then die, which I think is an okay thing, because that means we're also going to have a major conflict. If he's not patrolling, then this thug should murder their... basically whatever they've got there. And he's going to be doing... He's got really good morale, so we don't have to worry about that. But he's got Power of the Spheres, Soul Vortex, Resist Magic, Ghost Form. Actually, the more I think about it, I think Ghost Form is better first. We'll do Resist Magic second. This will only... The Resist Magic... If he's got a big Mage Core there, he's going to probably... I mean, the Resist Magic probably won't matter. The Resist Magic is going to be helpful if there's a Priest or something that might banish him. And then he'll do Quicken Self and Attack Closest. So he's going to come in and either gem bait and die, or ideally kill the PD and make it a free and clear move for my army coming in. And my army coming in, this is going to be my best army on the board. It's not necessarily the best troops, but I've got a huge Mage Core here. So we're going to have a bunch of Water Ward, a bunch of Quickening, and the siege strength that we're going to be bringing is pretty high. It's probably going to be about 370, which should be enough to crack it. Oh, wait, these guys are moving in, these guys are moving in. This guy is researching. Okay, that's all fine, I think. Now, the weird thing about this for Pelagia is because Pelagia is primarily an aquatic nation, this nation connects to this moon connects here and here. But I don't think it connects in other places. So he actually has to reinforce this from here. And this goes down here. So his little path to reinforce that and to attack me is actually sending stuff from his capital and whatnot down here, sending it up here, and then sending it over. And there's a decent chance that he sends this army to reinforce this to attack me, because it can't really go anywhere from here. It's an aquatic army, and there's no real aquatic connections to anything I own. Like, he has a land connection here where you can go from this water province to a land province. So I'm not sure, unless he's going to invade Gelenor, which I don't think he would do, then he's probably going to move this. He might move this over here. Now, if he does, this magic phase attack becomes even more value, because not only would I kill the PD potentially, but then my army will come in and meet, because when he's moving in the normal phase, I'm going to own this province, so that will trigger a battle. Whereas normally when you move into a fort, there's not going to be a battle. But if in the magic phase somebody takes the fort you're moving into, there will be a battle. And we'll have our army present at that battle, and our army will kill half of his army. And then he's going to be a very sad panda. So that is basically the plan that we have. The other nice part about this is when we take this, we are not constrained by this business like we need to come over here on the jellyfish. We can just directly invade, like come down here and then hop in the ocean and start taking all of his infrastructure. So these are all, I think, decent things. Now, we are extremely YOLO. I've had to alchemize a ton of gems to have all the pearls I need to actually do all these attacks. We are very, very, very YOLO right now. And if all these attacks fail, there's a decent chance I could lose an invasion. Now, I have a bunch of things. Like, I'm moving. We got our guy teleporting over here, and he's going to take this army, and this army is probably going to gateway over here, or maybe down here, depending on how I'm feeling. Probably down here. And we'll have other stuff that's over closer to this side of the board. Come over here and reinforce this. But we're very YOLO. If all my stuff starts failing, the walls could start crumbling. And with that, I want to talk, I've been reading this book. It's written by this British author, I think, but it's Hitler Nemesis or something. Anyway, it's very much like a pro-British perspective on World War II. And so I'm going to switch over to talking about that now, which is without a doubt going to trigger some people. In some ways, because militarily and diplomatically, my situation is a little bit like Hitler's, which is really weird to say. So anyway, if this seems like something that might trigger you, just go ahead and leave the video right now. And with that, I will do a couple disclaimers before I talk about something that's like definitely a very sensitive topic. So obviously, Hitler and the Nazi regime is horrible in that they committed horrible atrocities, and they had an ideology that had to do with like racial purity and genocide. Essentially, it kind of evolved into genocide. But yeah, anyway, so obviously they were bad for that, and they were also going out and conquering a bunch of people. Even if you don't commit genocide, you just take over their countries, is not a very nice thing to do either. So anyway, all of that is like morally bad, but I want to talk about the diplomatic situation and the military situation. So acknowledging all the moral stuff, it's pretty interesting. And there's kind of an analogy I want to do, and I'm going to tell you before we get started in this who all the players are in the analogy. I, sadly, am in the position that Germany was in. Blandos and the inhabitants thereof, Tianchi and Jotunheim, not really Yomi because that was before their time, they're kind of like France. And England is kind of like Ulm. And the USSR is like Pelagia. And America is like Erythia. And I'll explain why all that is. All right, we're going to get to that. But before we get to that and I explain all of it, I'm going to go through a little quick mini history of World War II. And then I'm going to take you to the point in time where I think we're in a very similar situation. And even again, before we go farther, I want to tell you the reason why I'm thinking about this. So one is I'm just reading this book about it, and so I'm thinking about these things. But the second is I never understood why Hitler invaded Russia. And I've made the comment many times where I'm like, this was the dumbest idea that Hitler ever had. And this is when, like, he made his biggest mistake and he threw it all away. I mean, it's a good thing he lost, but this is the point where he made all the tactical errors. So I never really understood it. And I will tell you that only today have I understood. And some of that is because I've read more. and I've understood more of kind of the situation from Hitler's perspective. But the other thing is, being in this position, I feel like I'm in the same position, militarily, diplomatically, etc. So we're going to get to that. Now, the mini history, right? So when Hitler took charge of Germany, he did a bunch. He was printing money like crazy. The economics of it were not very sound. His system was basically set up that if he couldn't get spoils of war and new land and new territory and slave labor from the people that he was conquering, the whole thing wasn't really going to work out. But anyway, at the beginning, he wasn't getting the slave labor. He was was printing money and building a ton of infrastructure. He built the Autobahn, but he also built he pumped up the German military economy and was cranking out all sorts of tanks and planes and all of this. So anyway, when the war started, he had taken some kind of minor territory around Germany, which was, after World War I, Germany, the German-Hungarian Empire was kind of split to pieces. And so there were a bunch of German people that lived in countries that weren't Germany, and so that was his reason for militarily annexing them. And this was in violation to the Treaty of Versailles, which was the treaty that closed World War I. So nobody was happy about that, because he was militarizing against the Treaty of Versailles by building military forces that were prohibited, and he would use those military forces to annex territory, and nobody was excited about that, but nobody was going to stop them. Because at the time, the Great Depression was happening. England and France were having strikes and labor issues with communist parties that were popping up, because that was kind of like the thing in that time, was there was a bunch of socialist and communist parties kind of popping up in Europe for the first time. And so anyway, there was the Great Depression and unrest, and everybody also, people were alive who in World War I, and they didn't want it anymore. The population did not want to go to war. So I knew this. And he was basically able to be like, okay, we're going to go over here and take this from this little rump state, and we're going to bring it into the German Empire. And when he went, people were celebrating him coming, like the Germans in those lands. So because of all of that, the West was kind of fine. Okay, France and England were like, fine, that's going to be okay. Well, as things progressed, Hitler got the Sudetenland, and then he started talking about some land in Czechoslovakia where there were German speakers, and they were being horribly oppressed by the Czech government, which, when that happens, those are like the drums of war from the Nazi propaganda machine saying, we're getting ready for war. And they're getting the population ready for war and building up a cause for war so the population will go along. And anyway, they were beating those drums, and now the West was actually getting nervous because they had eaten, and there were some other smaller kind of little rump state areas that Germany had eaten. But now they were also talking about not only taking the part of Czechoslovakia that was German-speaking, but maybe taking the whole. And then Chamberlain from England came over, and he negotiated with Hitler, and they went back and forth for many times, and eventually they came to an understanding that Germany would only take the German-speaking part of Czechoslovakia. The problem with that was, once they had taken that part, Czechoslovakia wasn't really able to defend itself. They basically had an undefendable border, and they were economically, militarily weaker after they gave all that land. But that's it. And so Germany could take it, and then 6 months later come in and take the rest. But Germany went and kind of took it all. So the whole peace in our time thing didn't exactly work out. So they took this, and everybody, France and England were very upset with this. France actually had a defensive alliance with Czechoslovakia, but they didn't end up exercising it. So everybody was very upset, but nobody did anything because none of the countries wanted to go to war. And I think this is a thing that pops up in Dominions too a little bit, where a lot of times people don't want to do things that are probably going to be painful and bad and involve lots of scripting. So England and France really did not want to go. They did not want it. And that's pretty evident by how things played out in Czechoslovakia. Well, one thing people don't really talk about is Poland. They also ate part of Czechoslovakia. Germany was in talks with them, and they were saying, hey, let's go ahead and eat Czechoslovakia together. And they basically did that. And Poland was run by a dictator. And the Polish government was also not very nice about Jews. So there were some similarities there between Germany and Czechoslovakia. Germany and Poland. And anyway, so they ate Czechoslovakia completely. And then the German war machine targeted Poland. And this is where England and France started drawing a line in the sand. And they said, do not attack Poland. If you attack Poland, we're going to go to war. And there was a lot of negotiation back and forth. And then Hitler conquered Poland in like a couple weeks or something. I mean, it was super fast. But that did actually trigger England and France to declare war. Now, the thing is that France, they were planning on defending themselves through the Maginot Line, and which was this big defensive line where there were trenches and tank blocking things and bunkers. So they had a very defensive mindset. So when France declares war on Germany, it's not like Germany has all their armies over here up in Poland. It's not like France was like, okay, we're declaring a war and we're invading. That wasn't how France even was thinking about the war. They were like, okay, well, we're going to go to war and we're going to wait for you to attack us on our defensive line. I mean, they might have had more plans, but at like a big macro level, that's kind of how they were thinking about it. And England, they declared war as well. Now they have the fleets and stuff, which can threaten a lot of the German imports, but Germany was pretty autocratic at that point. I mean, autarky, right? They had a lot. Within the stuff they had conquered, they were able to source a lot of the raw materials they needed. And I know this is getting to be a rather long history lesson now. But anyway, England declared war, but England was busy occupying the rest of the world, which people sometimes forget about. They weren't exactly the good guys. And one thing I've joked about is it takes something like Germany to really make England look like a knight in shining armor. But anyway, yeah, because their armies were all busy over here, their navy was busy. These people weren't happy English citizens necessarily. The English rule of law was enforced by a military. And so they couldn't exactly call them all home. Well, they'd put some of their troops in France, which quickly got kicked out. And that's Dunkirk and stuff. That was how they made their rather slightly glorious exit. But anyway, England didn't really have troops anymore to really threaten much of Europe. But they had a big navy and they had a big air force, but it didn't necessarily, like war for them, especially once France fell, war for them, it was kind of something Hitler couldn't really understand. Hitler didn't want to conquer them. And the reason Hitler didn't want to conquer them is because he valued, well, first of all, he liked how they built their empire. And second, he knew that if he conquered England, a lot of the English colonies would all go back into kind of native hands, and he would rather have them being controlled by England while he basically had control of Europe and then was able to move eastward into Russia. Anyway, let's start bringing this back to how this is similar to the Dominions game, because we're getting very close to the position that I'm in. And the thing is that there was this point after Poland was conquered and England and France declare war, but England doesn't have a ground army to come over here and invade Germany, and neither of them actually attacked Germany. They just declared war. And it was in some ways it was kind of a Cold War when it first was declared, because they weren't really threatening to kill them, which is kind of the situation I'm in with Pelagia and with Ulm and also with Erythia. Now, but when Blandos was alive, that was the position I was in with Blandos. They weren't going to make peace with me. They couldn't kick me out of the ocean, but they weren't going to let me keep the Conjure province or the Throne of Flame, the Throne of Fire. So, in this analogy, France is basically like saying, hey, we're at war with you, but we're going to wait for you to come and fight us. Like, you have to come fight us. That's how we're going to declare war. And that's basically like the people on Blandos. And England is saying, we're at war with you, but we don't really have ways to do much, but we're at war. And that's kind of what they've done. They did a little bit of raiding where they gave me some blood thorns. We lost our god to them this turn, which is a little embarrassing. But they don't really have a way to kill us. But yeah, they're just saying, okay, we're at war. And the USSR, now we'll talk about them to make the connection with Pelagia. The thing is, so what Hitler saw is that the only reason England would hold out is because they had had some assurances from the USSR, which kind of isn't exactly true. The USSR hated England. I mean, the entire like Bolshevik thing was about capitalist encirclement and stuff, and how England was a horrible world terror, which there's at least a bit of truth to that. But anyway, they had warming relations for a while with Germany, because Germany needed a bunch of raw materials to run the war machine. And Russia, or the USSR, had been basically an agricultural state that had not industrialized for a long time. And Stalin basically industrialized the country. And the way he did it was he had pretty close to slave labor for the population, put them on collective farms, and bought the food from them, the grains and stuff that they grew at extremely low prices, and then sold them on the world market, and would use the money that he got back from that to build to build capital equipment. And some of it was for improving agriculture. Like when Stalin came to power, they had no tractors, and he built tractor manufacturing plants and cranked out a ton of tractors. Now, all that said, the agricultural output for Russia was significantly less well into the time when the Bolsheviks took over compared to prior. So it's not like there was an amazing renaissance of agricultural production. But what they were able to do is they were able to take all the agricultural products, give them to the state, and the state sold them and used the money that it got from that to buy a bunch of capital goods. And a lot of that, they were buying military equipment, weapons, but more importantly, they were buying the machines that they would need to make those weapons on their own. Because to make modern weapons and machinery, you need modern weapons. I mean, you need modern machinery. It's very hard to start out as a non-industrialized nation and just say, okay, well, we're going to read books and do it. Like you have to get a lot of the seed equipment to make more equipment. Anyway. But they did that. They were trading with Germany for a long time. But about this time, relations started cooling after Poland was conquered. And when Poland was conquered, by the way, Russia, the USSR was in on that. They got a big chunk of Poland. And later, when Germany was kind of forging the Axis alliance between Spain, which was controlled by Franco, and Italy, which was controlled by Mussolini, and then with Japan, they were asking Russia if they wanted to be in, and Russia was like, sure, but we want a fair amount of the Baltics. And the Baltics was to protect a lot of the core Russian land from like a naval threat or like troop transport through ships and stuff. So anyway, they wanted certain parts of the Baltics to protect the motherland. And Germany didn't want to give that. He felt like Russia was basically vulturing a bit too much on the Baltic stuff, and he didn't want to give that. He also knew, because he was trading with Stalin, he got to see all the things Stalin was buying. He knew Stalin was militarizing. And he also kind of, in the long run, had always planned, it was in Mein Kampf, to head east and conquer a lot of Russia. And that was where he would get the room for the German population to grow. So, anyway, relations were cooling because the USSR wanted this so that they could maintain kind of power parity with Hitler. But Hitler didn't want to have power parity. He didn't want to give Russia more land. He despised Bolshevism. And so basically once that happened, Hitler had written about potential war with Russia and Mein Kampf, but that was when he made up his mind that we're going to attack them, basically. And there were a few things where it got even more solidified after that. But when the negotiations over the Baltics failed, and then Stalin was not really a major partner. Now, they had signed a non-aggression pact, and I think the non-aggression pact was still in effect. It was still in effect when Hitler attacked Stalin. But the important thing, just to summarize, and I will explain how this connects back to dominions in a second, is that when Hitler had basically conquered all of Europe and he had fascist-friendly states on the continent, he also had a non-aggression pact with the USSR, but this relationship was starting to become more adverse because he could see Stalin getting more power hungry and wanted to maintain power parity. He knew the only real reason it would make sense for England to hold out would be if at some point Russia would be strong enough that they could actually attack into him. And he was very suspicious that they were basically holding out waiting for Russia. And Stalin, once relationships started cooling, I think Stalin probably wanted to maintain a long-term friendly relationship with Germany. And if he expected it to fail, he probably expected it to fail much later. But once things started going south, and once the Baltic negotiations failed, Hitler wasn't responding diplomatically to a lot of requests from Russia anymore. And so Stalin was a smart guy. He saw the writing on the wall. But he thought the attack from Germany would come the subsequent year to when it actually did come. So he was surprised, but he knew it was coming. But when you looked at his talks, he was saying, okay, we're going to have to militarize and arm, which, I mean, he'd been doing that. But we're going to have to kick it up a notch because we're actually going to have to fight Germany. And so he was talking about this inside the Soviet Union. So now we go back to Hitler's position. What is Hitler's position? He controls a lot of land. He's been, very successful getting a bunch of land. And he has a Cold War kind of with England. He has deteriorating relationships with the USSR. And furthermore, America has been sending weapons to England. And the president, FDR, he was getting America warmed up, ready for war. Wait, sorry, I clicked off for a second there. And if you're interested, there's actually, I could talk for, you can tell I could talk for a long time about this, but there's some really interesting books about how FDR thought for a long time that the German problem was going to have to be something the U.S. would get involved with and deal with. But the American population was not okay with this. They did not want to have more American lives lost in another European war. Like if there was Napoleon in Europe doing Napoleon things, they didn't want American lives to be lost. And this was very much the sentiment of the majority of the population after World War I. That being said, as Hitler became more and more aggressive, the American population did not like that. They didn't like it. So FDR in many ways was a war hawk. He thought America was going to have to go to war, but he thought he would have to get the American population ready for it. And in the meantime, when he ran for election, he basically ran for election on a middle ground territory, whereas his opponent, and I forget the name right now, he ran on basically a pacifist or a less interventionist or an isolationist platform, saying, let's not get involved in European wars. He ran on a middle ground territory, saying, I don't want to fight either, but we're going to be the arsenal of democracy, whatever. We're going to send weapons to England. And later they would send weapons to the USSR as well. So, which goes to show, because they're sending weapons to the USSR, it wasn't so much the arsenal of democracy. It was much more trying to maintain a balance of power in Europe. And, Asia, I guess, if we're talking about the USSR. So, anyway, he actually kind of engineered, and this part is not necessarily mainstream, but if you look at the facts, it's what happened. He kind of engineered the conflict with Japan, and he did that. I don't even know where, I guess this is Japan on the map. He kind of did that. They basically put an embargo where Japan couldn't get any oil. They were completely starved. America owned the Philippines. And there was a pact between America and the Dutch and England where they basically agreed to starve out Japan, because England was very unhappy that Japan was taking over some of their empire. And that was basically Japan's mission, was that they weren't saying that Asia shouldn't be exploited and colonized. They were saying it should be exploited and colonized by Asians, not by white people. And so anyway, England was not happy about that. And anyway, America entered into this pact to basically starve them out. Now, and you can look at, since a bunch of documents have been declassified, you can see what FDR was saying with his cabinet. They were very much expecting that the blockade and embargo on Japan would mean that they couldn't continue the war in China, which they had been waging for a while, and it would basically force them to attack the U.S. What he was expecting was that they would attack the U.S. Philippines, or, some other, because the U.S. had a bunch of small outposts in Asia. And they were expecting they would get attacked there. And they put out orders warning all of these bases to prepare for an attack, but they never thought they would attack Pearl Harbor, which is interesting. And anyway, Congress did a huge deep dive on it, and one of the guys that was in Congress doing the deep dive, he wrote a really interesting book about it. But basically, what FDR was hoping was that if Japan attacked America, that is the only way the American population would get behind a European war, where we actually sent not just weapons, but soldiers. And he knew that if Japan attacked, that Hitler and Japan had an alliance, and that would trigger probably Hitler to declare war on the US as well. And then that would allow them to enter the war. Now, what's interesting about this, and God, I'm spending more time talking about the history than I wanted to, but maybe you don't have to listen to this. You can click off anytime. Hitler actually wanted this too. Hitler knew that Japan was probably going to attack some American targets, and they had told him so much through their embassy. He thought this would be good because he thought it would keep America tied up on the east, and then they wouldn't be able to engage in war on the west. Well, little did he know that FDR wanted this Japan to attack him so that he could justify war in the west, and that America had a big enough fleet, even after the disaster of Pearl Harbor, to wage a two-front war. Okay, so coming back to this, how does this connect to dominions and my position? Hitler was very worried that England was holding out, just going to sit here and twiddle their thumbs and get ready for Russia, and Russia and England and the United States were all going to attack them when they felt they had the advantage. And the advantage that Hitler had was that he militarized very fast. He basically won the arms race and was able to conquer Europe. Whereas England and France didn't want to militarize as hard as he was prepared to, because they were dealing with all the Great Depression stuff. And they didn't want to go to war. But now they were militarizing really, really hard. America was sending weapons to England. They would start later sending weapons to the USSR. And the side effect of that is that America was militarizing. They were ramping up their military spending in a huge way, an absolutely enormous way. And for a while, that was to send the stuff to England, but that would also mean the war machine was ready once they were ready to attack Germany. And what he did not want to have happen was all these guys to build up, and when they were ready, to all attack him at the same time. And so what he saw is he couldn't invade England, and so because he couldn't knock England out, he was going to go ahead and hit Russia before they were ready. And that is significant because for forever, the political leaders of Germany, if like you look at the game of diplomacy, you're in the middle of the board, right? And the guy who's like one of the world champions of the diplomacy board game, he likes playing Germany, but most people hate playing Germany because you can get attacked from all sides. But you also have a lot of power, and you can be a power broker, and you can arbitrate a lot of disputes. But the thing that German rulers have always worried about is having a two-front war where on one side they're attacked by like Germany or France, and on the other side they're attacked by Russia. Or Poland, or whatever is over here. Whoever's to the east of them, they're worried about getting attacked from that direction. So, the fact that Hitler voluntarily started a two-front war is shocking. But now maybe you can understand why he did it. He did it because, and this is something he said many times, time was not on his side. He had already gone through his militarization, and he was already ramped up to be extremely strong. But these other countries hadn't, but they were catching up very quickly. The Soviet Union had a bunch of German technology now, which they were figuring out how to mass produce because of all of their trading agreements from before. And he thought they had also kind of messed up when they were attacking Finland and got really shamed and embarrassed. And so Germany thought they could just trounce them in military combat. And for the first part of the war, like for the first week, that seemed to be true. Just a tremendous number of Soviet troops were captured. But what he didn't realize was exactly how big the USSR was, how deep their pockets were, and how much equipment they had. He really misunderestimated them. But anyway, he still thought, if we don't go now, it's only going to be worse later. Time is not on our side. And that is basically how I feel. I've been in a Cold War with England and with Russia, which is Ulm and Pelagia. We've conquered France. And at some point, we're going to get attacked by America. I don't know when exactly. So, yeah, what do we do? Do we sit here and wait for them to catch up in technology? Because right now, I've got a massive technology advantage over them. Not Rlyeh. Like, Rlyeh is the distant power. And Rlyeh doesn't want to fight me. They want to go be off eating easy fights. They don't want to sit here and have a hard fight, I don't think. They want to just sit over there and fuck with me like they did with Wish. But so Rlyeh is number one in tech, but we're catching up with Rlyeh, actually. We're closer to them now than we were before. And Pelagia is way behind us. They're like 40% of us. And Late Age Alm is right there with Pelagia at 40%. That means they don't have any level 9s yet. They might have one, maybe. But they probably have like maybe 2 8s. Or maybe 1 8. They're way behind. They're way behind. They probably haven't... They could either have 1 9 or an 8 and a 7 or something like that. They're way behind. Maybe they could be a little bit higher. Maybe it's like 2 8s or 1 9, I think. That's probably where they are. The thing is, once we've got so much stuff right now, like when we do Enter the Void, like fighting Pelagia, we're fighting underwater, they probably don't have Thom 9, so they can't do Master and Slave. We do Turn 1 Anti-Magic. We do Enter the Void. We do Army of Gold. What are they going to do? Like, what can they do? Their troops literally won't be effective. We'll be chopping them in half. We've got magic weapons on all our dudes. We'll have Fog Warriors too. We're going to have Mass Regen. They just aren't going to be able to fight. If I give them 10 more turns, that's when they're going to be ready. And then they'll all knife me at the same time. And like right now, Alm's being very greedy. He's like trying to run around in Vulture, but he won't make friends with me. So when he's running around vulturing, he's not saying like, oh, hey, we're going to be friendly. He's saying, hey, I'm going to eat all this and we'll attack you in 10 turns and I'll be stronger when I'm attacking you. Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. We're not going to sit around here and let these guys who are openly hostile to me build up an attack. We're going to go now. Now, the problem with this is it's a two-front war. I'm invading on 2 fronts versus 2 very large or reasonably large and powerful nations. You know, why would I ever do so? What the fuck? That was a lot of Tomb Chariots. Oh my god. You know, why would we ever do such a thing? Why would Hitler ever do such a thing? Why would he ever march into Russia? Well, time is not on his side. And I don't think it was on his side, actually. I don't think it was a good idea still. But I don't know how I would have negotiated my way out of it if I were him. For us, there's not going to be negotiating our way out of it either. I tried really hard to negotiate with them. Pelagia and I aren't on speaking terms anymore. He has annoyed me too much. And Arethia, I don't know. I mean, Arethia is clearly trying to fuck with me still. My hope in all of this is that Eru doesn't attack me and Arethia doesn't attack me. If they both attack me when I go on these guys, I'm going to be in trouble. But I'm hoping with Arethia I can negotiate with them. Like I can say, look, dude, you can get all the Olnish stuff you want, but just be on my side. We'll have to see. They're going to pressure him to do it. Arethia is probably going to attack, but I'm going to have reinforcements. Anyway. We're going YOLO super hard this turn, guys. We're going to go YOLO super hard. We are as strong right now relative to our opponents as we're ever going to be. There's no way I can think of to turn these guys into friendly dudes. And if they're not friendly, and not only are they not friendly, they're intent on future hostile action. Best to attack them, I think, now while we have a major tech advantage. And like, sure, we're going to get farther ahead and get more research, but the research we're going to get isn't going to matter as much. After we get Alt 9, most of it's not going to matter. Enchantment 9 will matter some. I mean, a good bit because we'll have battlefield-wide quickness, but it's not going to matter that much. It's not going to matter that much. So anyway, guys, that is me waxing. If you've managed to make it through to the end, and you're not just boiling hot, piping mad, triggered, because we're talking about things which, you know, it's in the internet, you can't really talk about sensitive topics. Like talking about, even like talking about the strategy and tactics of somebody controversial, it gets you in trouble. So we'll see. I'm sure I've triggered folks. And it's possible I messed up a little bit of the history. I think I got most of the things right. But anyway, if I messed up, I'm sorry. And also hope that you weren't triggered by it and maybe learned something. But I will tell you, even reading about it wasn't enough to make me understand why Hitler did what he did. Being in this game, in this position, I have felt the stress and I have felt the clock ticking and I felt like I have to do something. And it just so happens that there's corresponding nations that actually make it line up to be like a kind of historical analogy. So, anyway, guys, I've talked long enough. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.